Well, there's been a lot of discussion in the last week or so about manipulating the markets, about targeting Reddit and the Wall Street Bets subreddit for going after the GameStop stock, largely by elites who are upset that the hedge funds in the financial industry got hosed by a bunch of guys collectively organized online. But what's really interesting is about the accusations that are being leveled against that group, as if it's illegal, as if it is somehow a departure from the norm, when in reality, all these guys on Reddit did was mimic the tactics of the people on Wall Street. And one of the people who's going to explain those tactics is Jim Cramer of CNBC himself, who in 2006 gave a very candid and, pretty open interview about how hedge funds, and he in particular, would manipulate the markets whenever they were shorting stock. Let's take a listen.
It's really vital these next 6 days because of your payday. You've really got to control the market. You can't let it lift. When you get a research in motion, it's really important to use a lot of your firepower to knock that down because it's the fulcrum of the market today. So, let's say I were short. What I would do is I would hit a lot of guys with RIM. Now, you can't foment. That's a violation of
Ferment?
Yeah, you can't foment. You can't create yourself an impression that a stock's down. But you do it anyway because the SEC doesn't understand it. So, that's the only sense that I would say this is illegal. But a hedge fund that's not up a lot really has to do a lot now to save itself.
It's right there, Crystal. He basically admits it. He's like, yeah, what you do is you do this thing that's illegal because the SEC won't go after you, and you manipulate the market and you artificially drive the price of a stock down, all so that you can hit the price. So why does this matter? It's because what he just described are all of the elite accusations being leveled against the Reddit guys. Now, look, I am actually against all speculation. I think we should much highly regulate all of this behavior. We should tax the hell out of it. And I don't think these hedge funds add any benefit to our society whatsoever. But it's just so naked that you can see right there what they are admitting in just openly on the air about how they manipulate markets. And then they have the gall to call in the elites and the government and say that this is some sort of unprecedented situation. They do this every single day on Wall Street.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, it's interesting, his comments about the SEC in particular and the way that he views the SEC is like, they don't know what's going on. They're not going to do anything. And I think he's probably right about that because in part, you've got a couple of problems. And you see this with government agencies, regulatory bodies, oftentimes where, first of all, they're underfunded. You have decades and decades of politicians who say, we got to shrink the government. We got to shrink the government. We got to cut the budgets. You've got decades and decades of donors who would like to see that type of action of the SEC and other enforcement bodies being gutted. And then you also have a problem of like, look, if you're working at the SEC, you're not getting paid, the Securities and Exchange Commission, by the way, for those who aren't familiar with it, you aren't getting paid nearly what you would get paid if you were working on Wall Street, working for one of these hedge funds, working actually in the financial sector rather than regulating the financial sector. So by and large, you're not attracting the most sophisticated people. This is not to smear the people at the agency or say they're all dumb, et cetera, but that's just what the market ends up looking like. You don't get the very tippy top of the field because they're going to work on Wall Street where they can make $1 billion versus working in the SEC where they're going to earn a government salary. I'm sure there are lots of good, smart people there doing their absolute best. But when the whole thing has been gutted over years and decades, it's going to be a very challenging landscape that you ultimately face. So guys like Cramer, all these guys, they feel like they can get away with whatever. They can do whatever they want. They can go on CNBC and pump something up that's going to benefit them. They can say, hey, the market's going to crash and trigger all this selling off that they themselves benefit from. And they never have any expectation that that's going to come back to bite them.
Yeah, and there's another quote, which it was too long to include, but he talks about how then you call the Wall Street Journal. You get a bozo reporter who would feed that Palm's got a killer. They're going to do all the things you must do on a day like today. And if you're not doing it, maybe you shouldn't be in the game. And so he talks there about manipulating the media, about creating a foment and an environment that you can literally blatantly violate SEC rules, all in order to drive the price of stocks down just so you can make money on the short. And look, is this concerning to the SEC? Well, it should be. But realistically, what are they doing about it? Nothing. But then when all of this happens, now, and as I've said, how insane is it? When is the last time the SEC investigated why a stock went up Well, here's a former SEC commissioner literally on CNBC talking and comparing what happened with GameStop to the Capitol riots. Let's take a listen to that.
It really puts a lot of question about the integrity of the market, right? And it really kind of, everybody's scratching their heads over this. What should happen? What is the right thing to do to control this or stop this? Not unlike what we saw on January 6th at the Capitol, right? If you don't have the police in there at the right time, things go a little crazy. And that's kind of feels like what's happening with this. Much different, much lesser degree. It's financial harm, not personal bodily harm. But certainly that's the same kind of, platform created frenzy that people are operating under. And these are very trying times.
Once again, Crystal, it just tells you everything, that this is what concerns them. And that clip from 2006, that was 15 years ago. Okay. 15 years. What has been done? What questions have been raised? What investigations have been raised about that type of behavior, which happens every single day? And that's what she's talking about. She's like, well, we got a question about the integrity of our markets. It's like, well, what if they have no integrity at all? What if that the markets are controlled and are largely manipulated by people with large accesses to capital, and that all this has done is reveal how much of a sham so much of this is? And it just goes to show you that these people add no value. And, my friend Oren Cass, who runs American Compass, let's put this tear sheet up there on the screen because I want to give them a shout out. They have a 10-year kind of annualized look at hedge funds. So in the last 10 years, the S&P 500 total return was 14%. The average hedge fund is down 8% to the S&P 500. So this isn't even a particularly good place in order to put your money. So what do? Nothing. This is all they do. It's like their whole selling point is that they are a better allocation of capital than like the Vanguard Total Market Fund. And look, the guys at the top definitely are getting very rich, pulling off hedge fund short schemes like this. But in general, they're not really doing anything of value to the markets.
Hedge funds should be abolished. They are an accident of history.
Yeah. Abolish hedge funds. That's something I can get behind.
Yeah. They're an exploitation. David Day wrote a great piece on this. I mean, they come out of the exploiting of this loophole after the Great Depression, the New Deal era reforms that sought to tighten up regulation, make sure you didn't have this wild speculative behavior that led to the crash, that led to the Great Depression. There was one little loophole in there that basically super rich people got written into the bill that allowed them to have different rules for how their own money was managed. And that has been exploited to create this entire hedge fund industry. So it's just an accident of history coming out of the evil spawn of this loophole that rich people got for themselves during the New Deal era. So in my view, they should all be abolished to start with. But, going back to the comments of the SEC commissioner who was talking about comparing the Redditors to the Capitol insurrectionists, this is something that you and I worried about right away in the wake of the Capitol riots. Like, that insane, outrageous, violent, whatever it was, is going to be used to justify all sorts of anti-populist thinking and consolidation of elite control. Because anytime you have the people doing anything that elites don't like, they're going to be compared to the frenzy, in her words, around the insurrection and violence and all of that mess at the Capitol. So it's one more tool in their arsenal to say, these people can't have power. These people can't be trusted. We can't just leave them to their own devices to manage their own money and make their own decisions. We got to bring in the experts. We got to make sure. And this is where you also get the patronizing side of the argument that's being made often, which is we're just worried about them getting hurt. I don't think they understand what's going on here. Yep. That's why we've got to come in and make sure that they can't buy and sell freely the way that we can. We're just trying to look out for them because these poor masses just can't possibly understand what's going on here. So that's why I thought her comments were so interesting and so telling. Just watch over this year how many times, every time the people do something that the elites don't like, you're going to see the same comparison to being made in service of protection of elites and consolidation of elite control.
100%. That's exactly what's happening here. And they can use it to justify literally anything. And we should really be on guard for that. All right, Crystal, I'm looking forward to what we're going to talk about. That's next.